Coming up next, 3 game industry experts like you've never seen them before. On the record and off the script. Telling you what they think about the PlayStation 3 and the next-gen console war. Which system should you buy?
But assuming for a moment that you find one, I'd say skip for a year.
Who's ultimately going to win the biggest market share?
Nintendo's going to look like the winner.
And how will these new systems change the games we play?
I'm going to go out on a limb, too, and say that Blu-ray isn't that compelling.
Their answers aren't what you're expecting. And it's all next in the bonus round. Hey everybody, and welcome to Game Trailers Bonus Round, where all the biggest names in the video game business get together to talk about the issues that matter most. I'm Jeff Keighley, and joining me today are 3 wonderful video game industry guests, experts in their field. And first we've got Jason Rubin, co-founder of Naughty Dog, creators of Crash Bandicoot, Jak and Daxter. He's on a 2-year self-imposed hiatus from the gaming business, but coming back for the bonus round.
Yes,
right?
Definitely coming back for the bonus round.
Thank you, Jason. And also joining me is an outspoken video game industry analyst, Michael Pachter from Wedbush Morgan Securities. How are you, Michael?
Thanks for having me. Good.
Good to see you. And we've also got Grant Collier, who's the guy who put together Infinity Ward and has worked on Call of Duty 1 and Call of Duty 2, which is the top-selling Xbox 360 game today.
Thank you very much, Jeff.
Today we're going to talk all about the next generation of games, and of course the PlayStation 3, which is coming out on November 17th. So first of all, I wanted to ask you guys just about the general idea of next generation gaming, because we're seeing, a lot of really big games now costing, $20, $30 million. And, this is no longer, 5 guys working in a garage on a game. And these are massive titles. So how do you think the budgets of these big, PlayStation 3, Xbox 360 games, how is that going to impact the games that we play today? Are we going to see less originality? Are we going to see more sequels? Are we going to see less games? Jason?
It's a huge deal. And to be honest with you, I just came from a meeting that a $40 million game was talked about. So, and there have been more expensive ones. This $40 million game was not an MMOG, so it was just a straight up kind of character action thing that was going to cost $40 million. It's huge, but what's behind that is also extremely important. We're talking about 2-year development cycles. You get buried so far in what you're doing, and then you end up doing sequels and sequels after that you have a hard time thinking about new ideas.
Right.
It's very crushing as a game developer to be under these massive projects without breaks in between, running so many people, and it's hard for the publishers to be putting that kind of money up. We don't have external groups to go to get funding in the game industry yet, and a lot of that is the fact that they look at a 2-year development cycle, and it's just too long before they actually can see a return.
Right.
So it's really been painful for us, the increasing budgets and the long development cycles.
So Michael, as a guy that looks at the numbers here in the business, I mean, do the economics work for these, really expensive games?
Well, I think you asked the right question first. I mean, are we going to see innovation?
Right.
And the economics don't work unless the publisher knows that they're going to get a return on their investment.
Right.
So they have to think about whether a brand new property that no one has ever heard of is worth investing in making and marketing. And I think the answer to your first question is you're going to see a lot less innovation because it's not safe.
Right.
So you're going to see sports titles forever, and you're going to see sequels. We'll see Call of Duty 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. The Call of Duty franchise will last a lot longer than World War II did, but it will. And I think that to come up with a Crash Bandicoot for the next generation, a new concept, a Jak and Daxter, those are going to be few and far between. The risk may be taken by a Sony, may be taken by a Microsoft because they have to support their console. I don't see Electronic Arts, taking too many risks. Yes, Spore, but it's not going to be on the consoles. They'll start at PC and they'll do things where maybe there's an angle like Community where they think that they can monetize another revenue stream beyond just selling people discs.
So Grant, as a game developer though, I mean, is that frustrating to you that, because some developers feel sort of shackled that, they're always doing sequels? I mean, there's a lot of innovation, I think. EA would argue, Michael, that in a lot of their games, they're not innovating in terms of, brand new IP, but they're innovating sort of within their game. And they'd say,
cheerleader camp. Yeah, that was big. I mean, that was the reason we all bought Madden football.
But, they say it's like we're, Medal of Honor or whatever, they're innovating with everyone. I mean, Call of Duty, you guys certainly took a big step forward what you did with Call of Duty 2 versus Call of Duty 1, right? But is that enough innovation?
Yeah, no, it is definitely tough for us, and I understand where publishers are coming from. They've got these big propositions that are $20, $30, $40 million, and how can they how many duds can they really afford to have, before they're just gone? They're nowadays, with games being as expensive as they are, they are going to become less and less risk-taking. They're going to be more risk-averse, and you need to come in with, a sure bet. You need to be a solid developer and who's, independent, solid developer who's coming in from the outside, with a new, fresh idea that's really well laid out and very exciting and very engaging, and pretty much kind of politic, maybe have some friends that work at the publishers to get momentum. And a lot of these independent developers are getting gobbled up now because next-gen gaming is so labor-intensive. They just, a lot of publishers, they see the key talent, they want to tie it up for several years. And so I think you're gonna get a lot fewer penetration with very innovative ideas. But where I think that innovation can come from is with things similar to what Microsoft is doing, where they're making these mini dev kits where gamers can actually get into making games, and their burn rate is nothing. They can sit there and they can tinker on a game for 4 or 5 years, and they can make these little mini games.
It becomes sort of like the PC business, where you have like mods that people make. And, like,
exactly. And the risk there is minimal, and people can just go crazy. And you're going to just start seeing a lot of these little mini games coming out where these ideas are blowing people's minds, and then publishers, once they see those things viable and on an online marketplace and selling multiple units, they're going to feel confident that, hey, why don't we hire this little kid, and why don't we get a team together and start implementing some of these great ideas that he came up with and make a AAA product out of it.
The worry I have is that the number of titles, AAA titles we could be making, and the types that we could be making is far greater than what we're making. Almost every publisher has, due to the success of Call of Duty and other games like that, a World War II game out there. There's plenty of other games we could be making besides World War II games. But because the bets are so big, there aren't that many development teams, and you got to make your choices. It's easier to sign off on making another World War II game, even if Call of Duty's already out there, than it is to do something new. What happened to the comic book industry is that they started making Men in Tights stuff. The Spider-Mans did really well. So they said, we're going to make more Spider-Mans, we're going to make more Men in Tights. And people on the fringes who were reading comic books but didn't like the superheroes stopped going to the comic book stores. And so nobody could experiment with new types of comic books because nobody was going to the stores to buy comic books that weren't Men in Tights comics books. And what worries me is, yes, there are avid players of World War II games, more than enough to make Call of Duty successful time after time. But if all that people are experienced in making and all that we're doing is World War II games, the people who might have played something different will stop going to the game stores. And when the industry finally realizes, hey, we need to do something new, those people won't be going to look for games anymore. They'll be onto their cell phones. They'll be onto making online movies.
But what about
like
Xbox Live Arcade? There's a lot of innovative, smaller games coming out for that. That's successful. Sony now has they announced a lot of sort of arcade style games. There's this Flow game, which a bunch of USC students put together, and is now going to be on PS3 for under $15. I mean, is that the kind of stuff that needs to happen?
There's a fundamental difference though between a Flow and a $30 million game, and we may have a lot of successful small games.
Could that
but you're not going to be able to make
this
gigantic Flow game that has high production budgets. And I don't necessarily buy into the idea that you can make something really cheap that eventually will scale up, because the budget constraints themselves make it impossible to think on the scale that you need to think to make something that's going to work on a grander
like
scale.
Success of like a Tetris or some of those things. I mean, those are like mass appeal games, which were simple games, but still.
What's the last Tetris that's been made that's done something like that? It would be a Zuma. But you're not. That would be a perfect example. Zuma's a great game and it's done very well. It's an online game, but you're not going to say Zuma worked. Let's put $40 million behind it. Because there's no such thing as a $40 million, $20 million, $10 million Zuma.
Yeah, you are seeing Warcraft work, so let's chase that market. And
Warcraft works. Can 5 Warcrafts work? Somebody should be saying, Warcraft worked, what else can we do that would be massive multiplayer that isn't a World of Warcraft ripoff? And that's where we fail in creativity. We have, every one of them will be ogres. Every one of them will copy the style.
Huxley's a little different.
A little.
Very cool. Now, all these consoles are also costing a lot more money for consumers. So you've got, Obviously, it used to be, $299 was kind of the price entry for a real high-end console. Now you're looking at machines that are, $400, $500, $600 for the high-end PS3. How do you think that's going to change the business too? I mean, are we going to see sort of a slower ramp up of, how many consoles are sold out there, and that's going to, negatively impact the business because, the economics again don't work?
Yes and no. I mean, whether or not the PS3 comes out at $600 is not terribly relevant because they're only bringing a few to the shores, and they'd sell it at $1,000 if that's what they were selling at. The question is, how long will it be at $600?
Right.
What will it be at in 3 years? Will they sell tens of millions of them, or will they sell 10 million of them? That's going to make or break the PlayStation 3. The other thing is software is cheaper nowadays. I paid $70 in the store for a Atari 2600 cartridge in the 80s. Inflation. We're just moving to $59 with some of our titles.
And people are complaining about
cheaper,
that, right?
But it's cheaper by a lot than we used to pay. So, yeah, maybe getting the Razor is more expensive, but in exact opposite of the Razor Blade market, the Razor Blades, the software itself, is actually a lot cheaper, yet it costs us $20 million, $30 million to make one.
I think, though, your question hits two dimensions. The PS3 is going to be $600 at launch. I think they've already actually cut the price to $500 because they added HDMI to the less expensive unit. But you asked the question, is the ramp going to be slower? And it has to be slower. I mean, there are just fewer people who have $500 than there are who have $300. Jason made a point before we started today about how the table stakes have gone up if you want to enjoy the high definition capability of these new boxes.
I got about, $2,000 TV or something if you want 1080p.
Every other console ever has just plugged into your television. It's plug and play.
But to me, it's more like the PC business where you got to spend, Call of Duty. It's like, if you want to play these high-end PC games, you got to have like a $2,000 PC to play these games.
Yeah, and you have to be pretty technically savvy. Whenever you buy a new game, you have to download drivers.
Right.
If your sound card is incompatible,
a great PC is about at the cost of a good new plasma, or a good new.
Yeah.
And I have a few plasmas in my house, and if I wanted to get all of them ready for Blu-ray, that would be a very expensive thing. And I bought the house with the plasmas in them. They're in the wall, so I actually have to get a guy out to pull my wall out because they're fit in to get the new plasmas in there so that I can use the
problems
Blu-ray.
you face,
It's just
Jason.
not. But it's
when you
just
have
not,
3 plasmas
the point
in your
is,
house,
it's not going to happen for me. And anybody else who's out there with a $3,000 plasma they bought 2 years ago is going to look at the industry and go, wait a minute, the DVD movies are pretty good. Do I really need Blu-ray?
Right.
Do I really need to spend $3,600 plus to get the Blu-ray? No.
I think you do, but the good news, I guess, for that argument is that HD penetration is only about 20% in the U.S. and it's under 10% in Europe. So the consumers that are going to become, HD friendly haven't made that decision yet. I think it goes back to your first question.
I think a lot of them have plasmas. They just don't have HD.
20%.
20%
that's
have HD,
when you look at,
but
like,
they may have plasmas and still be getting DirecTV without HD.
It's not. There are not that many households with.
The thing is, but it's amazing to see like a console, coming out at, even like last year with Xbox, coming out at $400. I mean, Grant, you guys did really well with Call of Duty 2, but I'm sure a lot of people were playing that on a regular standard TV, right?
Yeah. I think you probably had a lot less penetration now. Or you had less penetration back then versus the people that are coming out with the PlayStation 3 now.
Do you think, are people like...
And they actually publish online. There are places you can go to find out what resolution, on average, people are playing Unreal, Doom, these games at.
Right.
And it's not high-resolution monitors. It's 1,200.
I just wonder when, if someone walks into a store and is going to spend $600 on a PS3 with the Blu-ray drive and all that, it doesn't make sense to really buy that before you buy the HD TV, or should you get the HD first and then get one of these consoles?
I think if you were to survey likely PS3 purchasers, you would get something like a 90% response that they either have an HD monitor or they intend to get one in the next year. Wow. I really think the correlation is that high.
HDMI.
Well, I think maybe they don't know
That's
yet. People
the key.
don't know.
It's the ones that don't
They
have
don't know
the
how
HDMI.
expensive that is.
It's the people who have already bought TVs, who are your early adopters, who are the people who want to buy the PlayStation 3 early because they are the people with money and they are the people who love technology and they are the people who love media, and they're the ones that are going to get burned.
Yeah.
Those people, they're the serious gamers who kind of they plan to buy the console, they want the peripherals, they want the high-end television, but then you're going to have the wave of the gifters, the moms and the dads that are buying the consoles for their kids, and they're not going to go out and they're not going to buy the full entertainment system.
Kids
for
are
them.
years out.
They're just going to get.
Kids are not in the first 2 years. For
But
the
see,
majority.
I think what
kids,
that
kids are what
suggests
is
is
the third year.
the Wii actually benefits from this.
I
Because
totally think
if
it
the
does.
parent walks into Best Buy and the Best Buy salesperson says, well, okay, it's $600 for the box and another couple of thousand for the monitor, the parent has to ask, what's my alternative? And it's buy this Wii for $249.
Yeah.
If, of course, if you can get one. So we're really talking about Christmas of 2007.
I'm going to go out on a limb too and say that Blu-ray isn't that compelling. I think the difference between the VHS and the DVD was very obvious from a quality standpoint. You had direct seek. You didn't have to rewind. Those tapes were ungainly. I mean, the tapes were horrible for those of you who remember them.
Yeah.
DVDs and Blu-ray, it's all about resolution and sound quality. And the end of the day, sitting at home, I think a good DVD on a good sound system is 90% of the way there for a movie experience.
Well, and now also you're seeing like digital downloads, like on Xbox 360. I mean, you can download high def content on Marketplace. Get great looking high def stuff without even a physical disc.
Here's another way of looking at it. Look at how much time people are spending on YouTube.
Right.
YouTube's video quality is not even VHS, and yet people are willing to watch that because that's where the entertainment is. I just don't see Blu-ray as a revolution that's going to drag people out.
All right, well, we'll talk about Blu-ray and what it means to PS3 coming up next, right here in the bonus round. Coming up next time in the bonus round, my chat continues with Jason, Michael, and Grant. We talk PS3 online strategy.
And Microsoft is at least 3 or 4 years ahead of Sony, if not more. We were talking off camera about whether Sony will ever catch up.
We hear whether our panelists think the PS3 is really worth $600.
I just don't see jumping in early as something important. Let your friend buy it and go play it at his house.
And finally, they give some advice to Sony.
Gosh, there's so many things that they should be doing differently.
Coming up next, the bonus round heats up. Our three experts pull no punches when it comes to the PlayStation 3.
You're really dissing poor Sony and the first-party capability.
I'm not.
Other than Jack
Is Sony's online plan good enough to beat Xbox Live?
launching online with the new console puts them in a huge hole.
And does the PS3 deliver a quantum leap forward in gameplay?
I'm not sure that developers and publishers are going to spend all that much effort making the PS3 one better because it doesn't really pay for them to do that.
Hear their thoughts next as the bonus round continues. Hey, welcome back to the bonus round, Game Trailer's new roundtable talk show. Tonight we're talking all about the PlayStation 3 and the next generation of gaming, and joining me are three well-known video game industry superstars. We've got Jason Rubin, the co-founder of Naughty Dog, Michael Pachter from Wedbush Morgan Securities, and Grant Collier, who's known for Call of Duty 2 from Infinity Ward. A lot of people watching this are probably wondering, if they can find one, if they should get a PS3 this year. So you guys probably have people come up to you on the street sometimes, say, you guys know a lot about the video game business. Should I spend $600? Is it going to be worth it to buy a PlayStation 3 this fall? What do you tell the guy? Jason?
Well, skipping the if, because obviously we've got to actually find one. But assuming for a moment that you find one, I'd say skip for a year.
Skip
That's
for a
my
year.
thought.
And why skip for a year?
360's got good games. It's got a lot of games, and in a year it'll either be cheaper or you'll be able to look at more games and decide whether or not the PS3 is worth the investment. I just don't see jumping in early as something important. Let your friend buy it and go play it at his house.
But you guys, these are the kind of thing where, Michael, do you think people are going to buy, buy one this year and buy another one the next year? Because, a lot of people, they have to make a bet now, and that's the system they're going to have for 4 or 5 years.
I mean, this is not like an improving technology, so it's not like you don't want to buy the first Motorola Q because, next year there'll be an improved model.
Right.
The PS3 is here to stay. We're not getting an improved model. So, I think that at best you're looking at the $500 box being cut in price to $449 next year.
Right.
For $50 of cost savings waiting a year, buy it now. Of course you buy it now. As far as whether there's a lot of good games or not, I don't know how many people play more than 4 or 5 games all the way through in a year anyway.
Right.
People may buy 10 or 12, but by this time next year, there'll be more than 10 or 12. There'll be more than 30 or 40.
It's got to be the 4 or 5 that you want to play, though.
Right, that's the thing is you got to forego a lot of great, 360 games. You decide, you don't, maybe you've waited and you're still playing your PS2. You miss out on Call of Duty 2. Imagine that, Grant.
Yeah, I think maybe if people, they need their next Call of Duty fix and they want to get Call of Duty 3, that's a good reason to buy a 360 right now.
Right.
Sorry, a PS3
and a
right
PS3,
now.
right?
Yeah, exactly. It's coming out in both. It all comes down to the games.
Right.
If there's games out there that you're really excited about and they're hitting your genre dead on, and you don't mind waiting in line or maybe going on eBay and paying double,
right.
Retail, then go for it. Otherwise, you're safe to wait.
Let's take a moment on this,
right.
because this is actually, of all the things we can talk about today,
right.
this is the one that's probably going to make the most difference for the viewer, because
right.
this is where their money is going to go.
Absolutely.
I would say in the future, and I think you'll agree as a developer, most games are going to come out on both systems. I'm not sure the PS3 games are going to be that much better than they are on the Xbox 360, because given for a moment the Xbox 360 is a lesser system, let's just put that on the table and assume right. that's true. I'm not sure that developers and publishers are going to spend all that much effort making the PS3 one better, because it doesn't really pay for them to do that. They're going to make one
right.
version and kind of have tweaks that make the PS3 version right. look better, but they're not going to be night and day different.
So that's why the first party games become that much more
it does
important,
matter.
Right? Yeah.
And so right now, if you look at the first party games, I would say the Xbox has some great things out there. It's got Halo. It's got another Halo coming out. We know we can trust Halo.
Right.
Look at the PS3. Look at what's coming out for it. You're not going to get, give or take, maybe Insomniac's game at launch.
Right.
Huge titles from
right.
PS3. I think if you buy the 360, if you don't have a system, you're not going to be that disappointed.
Right.
I don't think you're going to find yourself out.
Well, I think you get a year of library titles.
You're really dissing for Sony and their first-party capability.
I'm not.
Other than Jack and Daxter and Crash Bandicoot. I mean, you've got Gran Turismo, which people love. The Getaway, which I guess they're renaming something else.
Right. SOCOM
is an awesome game. God of War is an awesome game. I mean,
there's no question, but those are not coming out this year. So if you're
no,
going to put
they're
your
not.
money out
so
this
Halo's
year,
not coming out this year.
I'm back to Jeff's question about, do you buy a PS3 or do you buy an Xbox 360? Right. And I think the third-party stuff is going to be on both consoles. Yeah. The first-party stuff at Sony, there's more of it. I'm not going to say that Halo is not a wonderful game, right. and they have a handful of really good games. Gears of War is going to be a great game. Right. Sony's got 5. The other thing is, we talk about third parties like the universe is US and Europe. The universe includes Japan. Right. Those Japanese guys, those Japanese developers, publishers, are making their games for the PS3 first, because the PS3 is going to outsell the 360 in Japan. Right. So games like Katamari Damacy on the last cycle would never, ever have been made originally for the Xbox, because there were no Xboxes, and it is the weirdest damn game you've ever seen.
True, but the viewers, on average, did not buy that game. They were buying games that were very different from that game.
There were a lot of units,
by the way,
sold.
Is awesome. For those of you who haven't played it, it's awesome. That's a good example of a game you're going to miss out on.
I think 360 overall, it's been out for a year more, so obviously there are more better games.
And Alan Wake will be
Here's
awesome.
another thing. The Japanese publishers are now looking at the American market as where their bread is going to get buttered.
Look at Dead Rising, how well that's
sold.
sold.
The Japanese market has collapsed in a lot of ways in terms of sales. So the truth is not that they worry about Japan first anymore. They are worried about the United States, because they're spending $20 million a game, and they can't do that and be short-sighted and look at the Japanese market and say, what do they want here? Right. And that's not where the sales are. The sales are in the West.
Sega and Konami clearly are the leaders. I think that those guys are focused on U.S. first. But I can't say that Namco, Capcom, I'm not.
360.
And I think Dead Rising was a really pleasant surprise for them. Namco Bandai and Square Enix are making games for the Japanese market.
Oh, come on, Ridge Racer is going to be big on PS3.
And again, you look at those titles. Are those worth
Final Fantasy is?
Well, maybe
to follow
maybe
what you were
these
saying,
days.
Jeff, about Xbox 360's been out for a year. Also, this Christmas you're going to start seeing second-generation Xbox 360 games, where the PS3 is, they're how we were, making a game with one arm tied behind your back. Now for Xbox 360, the development's documented, the hardware's final. You're going to see people really tricking out the system with the games that are coming out.
And let's face it, you can find them in stores. And that's, at the end of the day, we're talking about if you had a choice, but the reality is you don't really have a choice this Christmas.
Right.
And
well,
if
you go to eBay,
on top of that, if you do think you might like online downloadable small games,
right.
it's going to be Microsoft.
And that's I think that the outcome of the console battle is on 3 levels. I mean, obviously titles matter. That's what we're talking about. I think live matters. I think online matters.
Huge.
And Microsoft is at least 3 or 4 years ahead of Sony, if not more. Right. We were talking off camera about whether Sony will ever catch up.
I think Microsoft's day job is worrying about the internet in a lot of ways.
Right.
So taking online and just saying, what would we do if we owned everything, has been a very easy transition for them. And they've done a lot of things to think ahead. What would gamers like? You know, matching against equally talented people before either one has ever touched the game.
I mean, is this
valuable.
online thing? I mean,
Sony
how
never thought of that.
mainstream is it? Because I mean, a lot of people are saying, you know, Microsoft's talking about how we've got, you know, 4 million people connected.
You talked about casual games. I mean, casual games make sense if you can deliver them to 4 million people instantly, and they can. It doesn't make sense for Sony to offer casual game downloads when they have, you know, 100,000 subscribers the first day. It's more costly to take the risk of, you know, of innovating anything in online. So that expands the market. The guys I talk to I talk to so many people who own 360s, and they say, I can't even play on my 360 anymore because my wife is playing Geometry Wars all the time. And it's become, and you know, I don't think Geometry Wars is like this chick game.
Right.
It's just, it's
more
a mass market game that is intuitive. You start playing it, you know exactly what to do, as you said, Tetris before. It's the same idea. And I think that what Microsoft, I think they intentionally did this, but maybe they inadvertently did it, they expanded the market. Now all of a sudden there are women playing on the 360. So they're pitching us, you know, on Viva Pinata, which looks to me to be the dumbest game ever made.
I tend to agree.
But if you think about the households that have a little kid and you have this Xbox 360, it's like suddenly your kids can play. Your little kids can play something kind of fun.
The thing I don't get about that is like it's an RTS for like 4-year-olds. It's actually pretty
if
complicated.
If you go online and you look at Oberon.com, Oberon.com, which is basically the back end for Pogo and Microsoft games and a bunch of other things, those online games, and there are a lot of them out there.
Checkers and all that stuff people are playing.
Zuma, all these other games. Go look. I mean, it's easy to see. This is the key. It's on demand. It's more than 50% women that are playing those games and downloading it, and that's a huge marketplace that's never come to the home console in mass that we now have a capability. And I think in exact opposite of my view of Blu-ray, on demand as a general principle is the future of entertainment.
Digital delivery and look at like
I want
Steam
it now.
And all that
it doesn't matter. It's I want it now, whatever it is. I want my music now. I don't want to go to a CD store. I don't want Amazon.com to ship it to me even overnight. I want to get it right now from iTunes. I want a movie now from my cable box. I want whatever it is right now. I think Microsoft's ahead in delivering the now entertainment.
Now, what I'm concerned about is that there's no resale value when you download. And I think a huge number of consumers are used to buying games and then trading them in, doing something, sell them on eBay. And I think that there is a huge community that likes to take games and play, have tournaments at other people's houses. Right. And I know now, obviously, live solves a lot of those problems because the four of us can play against one another any place in the world. It doesn't matter where we're located. But I don't think 100% of consumers really want to play online with a nameless, faceless opponent. I mean,
I absolutely agree with that. So, the one-player game is not dying.
Right. All right, well, let's get back on to PS3 here a little bit and talk about, you know, this system obviously, you know, it's been talked about for years, and, you know, the cell chip, we heard about that years and years ago, the Blu-ray drive that's going to be in PS3, all these features. You know, the big question everyone was wondering is, like, are the PS3 games going to be this sort of, you know, quantum leap beyond what was on the Xbox 360? And, you know, so far I think people are saying they look good, but I mean, you know, the Xbox 360 games probably, you know, there's certain games that look just as good on Xbox 360. Is that a big problem for Sony that they're coming a year later than Xbox? And, you know, it is more powerful than the Xbox 360, most people are saying, but, you know, it's harder to program for, and the games might not look, you know, that much better.
Sony's, their first generation of games are going to be coming on head-to-head with Xbox 360 second generation games. So they've got...
Although that Call of Duty looked pretty good for a first generation.
Well, yeah. Treyarch did a great job on that, so my hat's off to them. But I think in general, most gamers are going to be comparing, you know, apples and oranges, and they're just going to think, well, this is a game and this is a game, and not really, you know, clue into the fact that developers are on their second generation of making games on the 360 versus the guys who are playing catch up on the PS3.
That was, last generation was the same thing. I mean, PS2 and Xbox, where, maybe Xbox looks slightly better.
Most of the time when we talk about are they going to be that much better, we're talking about graphics. And I think the days, I gave a speech 4 years ago to the game industry where I said the days of graphics really are coming to an end. The difference between Toy Story and Finding Nemo from a graphic level are night and day. Finding Nemo is a much more detailed world, but as a movie, there's not much of a difference between the two. It's all story. You might like one or the other better. And I think our industry is going to have the same transition where graphically, yes, maybe the PlayStation 3 is a lot better, but it's not going to make a difference.
No, but the
online will make a difference. The gameplay will make a difference.
I think, Sony would argue they've got this cell, so you're able to have, put all these little different gameplay elements and these different, SPEs.
Believe it when you see it.
Say Ken Kutaragi calls you up one day and says, what do you guys think of what I'm doing here with the PlayStation 3? What's the one thing that, you think I should be doing a little differently with what I'm doing with the PS3? Michael, what advice would you give him?
Gosh, there's so many things that they should be doing differently. I think they should have built out online last generation. I think they should have started earlier because launching online with the new console puts them in a huge hole. I think that they have to think about rates of Blu-ray adoption, and I think they have to make everything easier for all their constituents, which includes the developers. Apparently, they haven't been particularly developer friendly. They weren't getting dev kits out early enough for people, and I think they're running a risk of games that just look terrible. I mean, I would really look like crap.
You think there's stuff that looks like crap though that's coming out for launch?
I don't know. Not Sony stuff.
Okay.
I think the third-party stuff. One of the knocks you heard last year was Madden Football looked like crap on the Xbox 360, and if EA can't take their basic game and make it look good, then nobody can make it look good. I mean, it's hard to do. I was actually shocked that you guys had such a good-looking game.
And a lot of that is the fact that they're a PC developer and they had already kind of thought of some of and dealt with some of the issues that Xbox 360 as a console for the first time brought home to the console makers.
All right, Grant, quickly. What do you think? What would you say?
I would have to say they should have made a move like Microsoft did and get an exclusive on Call of Duty. But actually, seriously,
offering it up?
Yeah, there's always next year with the next Infinity Ward Call of Duty. Seriously though, Microsoft they pretty much understood that they were going to be taking a loss on the 360 hardware, and they're just like, we're going to eat it. We're going to swallow it, and just going to get as many units out there as we can, and we're going to make it back on the software, and we're going to gain momentum against Sony. And it seems like Sony is not really willing to, take that hit. And they would
probably argue that it's, with Blu-ray and everything, it's still costing them way more than $600 to make a box, right?
Yeah, maybe, but they should, in my opinion, they should have priced it a little bit more competitively, and maybe thought out their manufacturing strategy. Learn from Microsoft and all their growing pains for getting their hardware units out into the marketplace, and kind of maybe think ahead about how they're going to implement their manufacturing strategy and get enough out there. Bring the price point down a little bit, be willing to eat that, and avoid their leadership erosion that they're suffering right now.
And finally, Jason?
I think Sony's a very smart hardware company. I do. I always have. Working for them was great. They need to transition into being a very smart software company. And by software, I don't mean the games they're making, because they have a very good first-party development group. But they need to start thinking about, beyond games, software that makes the hardware better, such as Live has made the 360 better.
That's a Sony-wide problem. When they have that problem, obviously.
They're a hardware company, not a software company. But the cool stuff is happening in software these days, between iTunes and YouTube and the other things that are going on. They need to start becoming a software company. The other thing is, having worked with Sony for a long time, when they say Europe, they mean Australia, the Middle East, and a lot of other places. Europe is the biggest territory, and Europe has always been very good to the PlayStation. At the end of the day, the PS1, the PS2 probably sold more software in Europe, which includes the rest of the world besides North America and Japan. And they really, need to take notice of the fact that those people are that important to them. And I think they probably deserved an apology.
All right, well, we're going to see what happens here when it all comes out November 17th. And coming up next, we're going to figure out who's going to win this console war. These guys weigh in. Next time, my chat with Jason, Michael, and Grant concludes, but not before they weigh in on the tale of the tape. Who's ultimately going to win the console war?
Sony hasn't ever been a hardware manufacturer without a majority, and it's going to be a very big learning experience.
And how will Nintendo's Wii change the game?
I heard you say again off camera that perhaps the Wii would be a fad and fade. I thought so before I played it.
Coming up next, the bonus round wraps up, but not before our experts place their bets on the console war. Which system will ultimately come out on top?
If Blu-ray's the standard, Sony's going to pass everybody.
And how will Nintendo's Wii impact the race?
I think that this is going to really capture people's imagination.
Jason, Michael, and Grant put it all on the line next as the bonus round concludes. This is the bonus round where all the biggest names in the video game business get together to talk about the issues that matter most. And joining me today are Jason Rubin, the co-founder of Naughty Dog, Michael Pachter from Wedbush Morgan Securities, and Grant Collier, who was the man behind Call of Duty 2 with his team at Infinity Ward. Now, we're talking about PlayStation 3 right now, and the big console war here, because this is, Xbox 360 came out last November. This year we've got, PlayStation 3, and we've also got Nintendo's Wii. So, everyone, online out there, all these gamers, you always want to bet on the winning system and know which is going to win. It's these great rivalries between these systems. So what do you guys think right now? Sony has dominated for a decade with PlayStation 1 and PlayStation 2. Market share, north of 60% with PlayStation 2 worldwide. Do you guys think, can Sony maintain that with the PlayStation 3, or are there some chinks in the armor this time? Michael, let's start with you.
I think that this is going to be a three-horse race.
Right.
I think that early on, Nintendo's going to look like the winner.
Okay.
Because I think at that price point,
and they have way more units out there too. It sounds like this year,
I think, and I don't mean early on the first month. I mean the first year.
Okay.
People are going to see that at $249, the Wii is going to sell really, really well.
Yeah.
I think it's going to be the first console of choice in households that are going to buy two consoles, and there's a lot of them, only because the PS3 is so expensive. I think Sony is going to look like the clear loser in that first year, and Microsoft in between. And I say this because I think the Wii will outsell the 360 month in and month out throughout 2007. Right. So people will perceive that the Wii's going to catch them.
It's leading because it's selling all these, even though it's cheaper.
And I think that, as Jason pointed out earlier, the price cuts are going to come.
Yeah.
So the Wii is never going to be free, and the PS3 is not going to be $600 forever. So, I think as that gap narrows, so it's going to start out at $350 between the PS3 and the Wii. As it narrows to $100, people are going to buy the PS3. I think that where Microsoft shakes out in this battle is really going to depend on Blu-ray.
Right.
If Blu-ray is the standard, Sony's going to pass everybody.
Yeah.
If Blu-ray is not the standard, maybe these guys have a point that there's no real reason to buy a PS3 because Xbox 360 has Xbox Live and offers essentially the same gameplay experience.
When do we think we're going to know that about, is it, a lot of people say like it's going to
Blu-ray?
be... Yeah.
You'll know about Blu-ray Christmas '07 because the studios have to make a choice. Walmart is not carrying two different formats, HD and then widescreen and regular for DVD. They're just not going to carry four different packages of a DVD. So somebody wins. The studios are going to pick Blu-ray. I think Sony wins. And then the question is, how quickly do they convince
So what are you
consumers?
betting, though? If you had, if someone said, who's ultimately going to win?
This is really a wishy-washy answer, but I would say that the final tally is going to be something like 38% for the winner, and 32% for second place, and 30% for third place.
Right.
And if I had to bet, I'd say Sony wins, and Nintendo comes in second, and Microsoft third.
The other guys pick up a lot of.
They do, but if you had a crystal ball and you told me it flips the other way and Microsoft has 38 and Sony has 30, I'd say sure. It comes down to pricing. What shocks me...
And the games, right?
I think the games are going to be good all across the board.
Right.
So I think what's shocking is in the U.S., Sony sold 300,000 PS2s in September.
Well, I think PS2 probably has the best software lineup of any
but
system this fall, just because they have a lot of great stuff.
It's the creature that will never die.
Right.
So, how long are we going to wait to measure who wins? If we go out 15 years from now, PS3 wins.
Right.
But if we're going to measure it in 2009, 2010, it's going to shake out, probably 30-30-30. And it's a great question, but there is no real
All right,
answer.
Grant, you're next. What do you think? So it's going to be 38, 32?
Wow.
I hope that added up to 100.
I,
Felt like it.
Yeah, that's going to be tough to throw the percentages out there. I just think that
you're not the analyst, so we don't
yeah.
expect that.
Oof,
But
thank God.
What do you think?
No offense.
Just go with my numbers, dude. It's
Yeah,
okay.
I'll roll. I think that Microsoft, they have a long-term strategy on
Right.
becoming number one, and I think it's a 3-console strategy. They're going to break in with the first one, they're going to gain ground with the second one, and then they're going to be dominant with the third one.
Right.
And that's their strategy. I think Sony's perspective on it is that we're the 800-pound gorilla. We're just gonna we're gonna muscle it through, and people are gonna buy it because we're Sony.
Right.
And I think that that's kind of biting them in the ass right now. And surprisingly enough, Nintendo's being really innovative. They're like, we're not going to try to beat these guys on technology. We're going to beat them on innovation and gameplay. And bringing, we have the new Wii controller, which is more kind of like a remote control, and trying to bring in the untapped gamer, bring in the female gamer.
Right.
So it's really hard to say who's going to win.
You're a betting man, though.
If I was a betting man, I think I would have to say it's still probably Sony,
Right.
but they're going to lose a lot of their market share.
Really? Okay. And so Microsoft and Nintendo
And
will both pick up.
Microsoft and Nintendo will gain that market share.
All right. Mr. Rubin?
Some history. I picked the PlayStation.
Yep.
We made Crash for the PlayStation. I got a lot of flack in the press for saying it was going to beat Nintendo. It did.
Yep.
The next generation, I picked the PlayStation 2. I was in the initial, the inaugural issue of Xbox Magazine. Go look it up. I was in the inside front cover along with 2 other people as Know Your Xbox Hater.
Right.
The other 2 were generically the Nintendo guy and the PlayStation guy.
Yeah.
And then Jason Rubin.
Right.
I was right on that one.
Yeah.
I can't go with Sony this time. I don't think that they're going to lose,
Right.
which means get slaughtered. But I think that they're not going to win, which for them means more than 50% of the total marketplace, including Nintendo.
Right.
I don't think they'll reach that. And they've spent a lot of money on this hardware, just as Microsoft has.
Right.
I think it's going to end up hurting everybody, but Microsoft is used to kind of losing money because they're making first-party titles for a smaller installed base. Sony hasn't ever been a hardware manufacturer without a majority.
Right.
And it's going to be a very big learning experience when they suddenly are launching these $20, $30 million titles into less than 50% of the market,
Right.
which as a first-party person is very hard to do. You got to spend the same to develop the title.
Right.
You got to spend the same to market the title, but then you find that your possible sales are less than 50% of what they used to be. That's hard.
How
That's
could they
hard.
have solved that, though? I mean, was it, is it just inevitable now, you think, that that's where it's going to end up? Or?
I don't know about inevitable. Things
Right.
change all the time. I mean, Halo radically changed what happened to the Xbox One. Had there not been a Halo, it wouldn't have been even close.
Right.
Halo came out of nowhere to a
Might
certain
not even be a
extent.
360.
There could be a PS3 title, for all we know, that's going to radically change everything.
Right.
There could be an Xbox 360 or a Wii title
Yep.
that radically changes everything. What could have changed? I would have spent less effort on the hardware and more effort on the software. I'll say it again.
Right.
We didn't need the cell processor to be what it is.
Right.
We needed the software backing up our software as
Right.
developers. We needed the online stuff.
Yeah.
We needed that to be better, and it isn't there.
So how dominant you're saying that you think Microsoft will they get more than 50%, or will it just be
No,
more
but they'll
split?
get more than they did last time,
Right.
and they'll probably be close to on par or potentially slightly above Sony. And for them, that's a win.
Yeah.
So who wins this war? Who wins this cycle? I think Microsoft wins whether or not they get 30% or 40% or 45% of the marketplace. I think Sony loses if they get less than 45%, and I think they will get less than 45%. Although, again, I think you guys are right. Eventually, they'll dominate in the long run.
Right. Well, let's
In
say
this-
they
in this
have a lot
cycle.
of great tail to sort of their systems they've shown that these things will sell for a long time, and PS2 continues, as we said, to outsell every other system this year in terms of the consoles. So.
I remember in 2004, my nanny, my kid's caregiver, came to me and asked me if I could get any PS1 games. And I said, "Oh, you have a PS1?" And she said, "Yeah, I just bought it for my boyfriend." Wow. And I was like, "Oh my God!" For $49. And I thought, God, somebody actually, is still buying this thing. Yeah. I think the PS2 is going to go a lot longer. It's at $129 right now.
Absolutely, you got God of War 2 coming next year.
PS1 games are still selling,
Yeah.
and reasonable numbers, thousands a week.
Yeah.
And those games sell.
Yeah, they were fun
And
games.
there
That's
are
important for
people
the
that
software
have those-
manufacturers because a lot of us will talk
Absolutely.
about the high end. The
But they're selling at $9.95.
Right.
But you know what?
Doesn't cost you anything to make them.
Ka-ching.
That there is going to be a problem with that, though, as far as the PS2 is concerned. I mean, it's getting so much harder to downport now with these next generation games. You
Right.
almost have to make a totally different game
Right,
for the PS2. So you're gonna have less and less, and you're gonna have kind of like the developers that can't make the leap to
Right.
the next gen. They're gonna end up being bottom feeders on the PS2. So I think that erosion's gonna happen a lot faster.
Because the gameplay is so different.
Where for the you could make a game for a PS2 and it wasn't too hard to downport it to a PS1.
Right.
Where it's just very difficult.
See, I think that's opportunity. You know, the $20 to $40 million cost of next gen, that opens up an opportunity for the Majesco, Crave, Ataris of the world who are not doing great financially, who are happy to make PS2 games 10 years from now.
We do a Call of Duty.
No, but it trails off. And remember, it still takes a year to 2 years to make
Right.
a PS2 title, and it's still a $10 to $15 million proposition to do a good one, even if you do something quick at $6 million. And you're going to sell it at, the price point comes down.
It's going to be
it's hard.
$19.95 or something like that.
Yeah, it's hard. There's like a sweet spot a couple of years after the new consoles come out where you make a killing in the last console because there's so many people out there that aren't willing to pay $600 or even $300, whatever, for the new systems. Then it tapers off pretty quickly.
So what about Nintendo and all this? You got, everyone's sort of been talking about how Nintendo's got a pretty unique strategy. It sounds like. I mean, are they doing the right thing? For Nintendo. I mean, are they going to help help the business not go the way of comic books as you were talking about before?
Yeah, I love Nintendo for that reason. Right. They keep doing interesting things.
Because after GameCube, a lot of people were saying, like, are they even going to bother doing another system?
I bought a 6-year-old a DS this year
right.
and watched her play, Nintendogs, which is not, in my world, a video game,
right?
But love it.
Yeah.
And it's great. And more power to that game. And more power to Nintendo. Props for putting that out there.
Yeah.
In my internal thinking, Nintendo's going to be in a different race. Yeah. And I consider the race between Microsoft and Sony for who's going to control the online communication, who's going to control the set-top box, so to speak. They're still in that war, and I think there's still validity in that battle. I think Nintendo's out of that. So to me, it doesn't really matter how much Nintendo makes as a share, as long as they're profitable and keep putting out interesting games. And I think they will be both. They'll be profitable and they'll put out interesting games.
I heard you say again off camera that perhaps the Wii would be a fad and fade. I thought so before I played it.
Right.
And I don't know. I mean,
question is, though, does everyone want to play all their games that way?
I don't think so, but I think that
there'll be a second console.
I think very clearly, and right now, 40% of households that have a console have two. They have a handheld.
Consoles were cheaper.
They may have a handheld.
Like, now when you're spending that kind of money on $600 on a machine, I don't know if that dual
well, the
Wii
is $249 with a game,
right?
And with a headset, it'll come down to $199 pretty quickly. Yeah. That's pretty affordable. I think the Wii expands the demographic. I went through at E3 the demo with a bunch of reporters, and the room was full of women, and every woman that played it said, "I'm buying this thing." I don't remember that with the Xbox. That just didn't happen. So you laugh, but I mean,
the presentations are done differently. Nintendo cares.
I think that this is going to really capture people's imagination
and grow the business.
If I
just wouldn't buy a console.
If I were Nintendo, I'd do the first few years on the Wii, and as you say, as the prices come down and people start buying the other consoles, I'd take your controllers, I'd port them over to the other systems and become a software company for a little while. Yeah. Then make the Wii 2, go out and do it again. Be the innovator.
That would be cool.
You agree, Grant?
Yeah, I think that Nintendo's going in very interesting paths because.
Does it excite you as a developer? I mean, to see what they're doing.
Yeah, but we have the same kind of issues with development where the Wii is kind of like a double strength GameCube.
Yeah.
And when you're trying to create a game for either Microsoft or Sony, you have to utilize all the graphical power that's there, and you increase your art staff and increase your budget, and then the downward compatibility is not as easy. So for us, it's really hard to get onto the Wii, but because they are not exploding, the graphical boundaries, they're not leaving all of the developers behind that can't make that transition to next gen. So I think that there's going to be a lot of games that are going to be coming out for the Wii because it's just a lot more accessible for developers. So I think that that's going to be a big win for them, where you're just going to have kind of like the titans of the industry making a lot of the games for the 360.
We talk about how the PS2 is still doing well. Nintendo could almost become one generation behind and do very well with that.
Absolutely. No, that's part of the
Just
charm
stop
of
for
Wii
one
is they can
generation.
charge cheaper because it's not HD.
And be that company.
Right, because that's not not an HD system, but it doesn't need to be because it's more about the gameplay.
And remember, they're making money on the hardware, which means they have a lot more to reinvest in technology, software. Yeah, so I think don't underestimate.
They have a radically different way of developing software inside Nintendo than we do in the United States. I mean, think about for a moment that Activision saying, okay, 5 guys go out and figure out what they would do with Call of Duty 3 or whatever, then 4 or whatever, and the best one will make into Call of Duty and everyone else can try something else. So just mess around for 6-8 months and give me a demo and we'll pick the best. That's how they develop it.
Yeah,
and it's brilliant.
Yeah,
It's cool.
They have,
and that's how Mario Sunshine got the hose. Miyamoto walked up and said, the hose is cool. This water technology is cool.
Yeah.
That's the next Mario game. And the other guys, cut, do something else. Or maybe one of them became another game.
They're willing to fund a bunch of incubator programs, which is really great.
And they take their time.
Yeah, and it would be nice if we could have that kind of mentality over in the States. And I think there's some VC, venture capitalist companies that do that, but I don't think anyone's seriously into it. Any publishers over here in the States?
Not yet.
Not yet.
Maybe they change. All right, well, thanks guys for joining us here on the show. We appreciate it, and we'll see you guys next time in the bonus round. Coming soon on the next episode of the bonus round, Nintendo's Wii, industry savior or gimmicky toy? 3 new experts join me to debate the future of Nintendo. That's next time when the bonus round returns with an all-new episode.
Bonus round.